Welcome back to Twisted Tuesday on Sinister Serials, where Suburban Secrets continues to unravel. Last time, Betty's investigation into the Garden Circle's enigmatic activities led her to unsettling discoveries. Join us as she peels back the layers of Rosewood Falls' genteel facade, uncovering truths that might be better left hidden.
Chapter 7, Caged No More. Doris knelt in her prim suburban garden, yanking at weeds violently, clawing their way between carefully cultivated rose bushes and rows of marigolds. She attacked each root viciously, envisioning ripping away the relentless social expectations embedded in her life. She had awoken early from another nightmare of racing desperately across endless manicured lawns, while faceless spectators pointed and laughed. No matter how hard she ran, white picket fences surrounded Doris on all sides. Barbed and razor wire coiled menacingly atop each barrier, glinting when it caught rays of sunlight. Gardening was meant to soothe her inner turmoil, bring order and beauty amidst external chaos. But recently, visions of her former life in New York taunted Doris like phantom limbs of the spirited woman she had been. She could almost smell the pungent oils and earthy stench of the artist warehouse colony she had relished living and working in. So unlike antiseptic suburban houses with surfaces polished to a high-gloss shininess. Doris stood abruptly, using a trowel to slash violently at roses climbing a trellis archway, marking the entrance to her cultivated Eden. Crimson petals rained slowly around her, velvety soft against her upturned face. Their sweetness turned cloying in her throat. These flawless flowers were intertwined too intricately with her internal cage. She had tended each bush as it grew in containment, curated beauty disguising captivity. Wiping dirt off her hands, Doris hurried inside to dress for that evening's book club gathering. She chose an ivy green blouse paired with a full calf-length skirt, feeling leaves and vines suited her mood. She arrived first at the community center and set up folding chairs in anticipation of discussing Kate Chopin's The Awakening. That iconic feminist tome sparked Doris's longing for wildness and freedom throbbing like a phantom limb. As her fellow members entered, Doris noticed a new attendee trailing shyly behind Eliza. The stranger appeared close to Doris's age, early 40s perhaps, willowy frame draped in a soft yellow sundress with a vintage white lace collar. Her short, ginger blonde hair held traces of the finger waves style fashionable 2 decades prior. She blinked large brown eyes behind cat-eye-style glasses that lent her delicate features a surprisingly bold allure. Eliza led the newcomer towards Doris, smiling kindly. "Margaret here works part-time in my library. Her thirst for literary discourse rivals even mine, so I knew she must join us." Doris extended her hand in greeting, hope kindling at the prospect of another woman who felt out of sync with their era's expectations. She sensed a recognition of shared outsider status stirring behind Margaret's diffident posture. As the evening's discussion enlivened, Doris observed Margaret slowly relaxing. The newcomer shared poignant insights about Chopin's Edna Pontellier character and her gradual awakening. In Margaret's gaze, Doris glimpsed echoes of all the women struggling to embrace true selves while navigating narrow societal constraints. Her own longing reverberated in response. On her walk home later, beneath streetlights now muted in pre-dawn grayness, Doris welcomed the book club's ability to resurrect her creative spirit so long suppressed. She inhaled the night breeze deeply, feeling it expand the bars of invisible cages. If she continued gathering allies and wisdom, one day Doris might fly free. As Doris prepared to leave, Margaret surprised her by reaching out to gently squeeze Doris's wrist. "I admire your willingness to question everything about the roles my generation blindly accepts for women. My hometown wasn't so terribly different from this place." She glanced towards the window and the quiet suburban street beyond. "Keep speaking your truth and carving out spaces where our voices and power can flourish." Her bold words echoed Doris's inner mantra since joining the salon. But then Margaret's expression turned pensive. "Yet we must be so careful, too. Challenge the wrong cog in a clockwork machine at risk of damaging more than your own reputation." Margaret's eyes took on a glint of experience, earned through suffering repercussions of her nonconformity before coming to Rosewood Falls. Doris thought suddenly of Betty 2 streets over, likely still plucking at threads connected to the cryptic stone and possibly entangling secrets clinging to the town's facade the way creeping ivy clung to brick and clapboard. "Have you ever heard any whispers about the garden club having unusual influence around town?" Doris asked Margaret casually as she pulled on her jacket. Margaret's gaze snapped to Doris's face. Power and influence rooted in this town's history can span wide as oak branches, become nearly impossible to untangle or escape. Margaret murmured it almost to herself before blinking rapidly and glancing away. Doris shivered despite warm air greeting her outside. She thought again of Betty and prayed her neighbor's fierce curiosity didn't blind her to encroaching dangers woven through Rosewood Falls' pretty surface. Perhaps their book club discussions planted seeds that might shift perspectives in this town over time. But provoking change openly could also prove damaging indeed. Her steps felt heavier as she walked home alone, thinking of clocks, roses, and creeping vines that all appeared innocuous until revealing their thorns. Chapter 8. A Web of Thorns. At the next Garden Circle planning meeting, Betty found herself seated directly across from Carolyn Page. The retired nurse, always thin, seemed nearly swallowed up in an oversized cardigan. Her collarbone jutted sharply above the latticework of wrinkles, creasing her pallid skin. Carolyn's eyes appeared clouded, obscured by distance or hauntings. When Evelyn Hart entered, the circle of chattering women hushed instantly. Evelyn paused next to Carolyn's chair, smile taut. "So glad health permits you to rejoin us, Carolyn dear. We've missed your artistic handcrafting morale-boosting cards for hospital residents." Her words seemed kind, but her nails dug into Carolyn's shoulder until the woman winced. Evelyn continued, circling the table slowly. Betty glimpsed each woman unconsciously sit straighter as that commanding presence brushed past them. When their leader's piercing eyes met Betty's, she had to resist recoiling. Being the sole focus of Evelyn's attention felt like sunbeams through a magnifying glass. After Evelyn launched brisk planning for the fashion show fundraiser, Betty stayed behind to help Carolyn gather her sweater and purse. As Carolyn reached the doorway, she suddenly grasped Betty's wrist with surprising strength. "You still don't fully see the vines strangling everything, do you?" Carolyn's foggy eyes sharpened, reflecting the intelligent nurse from before last year's breakdown, but you trimmed their edges enough to glimpse what they disguise. Carolyn's gaze bored into Betty's. "Mark my words, when you first awaken the roots below ground, take cover before purely primal instincts lash out." Her fingers spasmed around Betty's arm. Few who see the purple bellflower's deadly beautiful hearts survive unscathed to tell their tale. A crash at the doorway made both women jolt violently. Evelyn stood outlined against the doorframe's ornate molding. Smile stretched too wide, she chuckled. "Do take care descending the stairs, Carolyn. Some plants sport treacherous thorns beneath familiar flowers." Carolyn averted her eyes and scurried away on slippered feet, whispering against polished floors. But echoes of her warning lingered long in Betty's mind. In the following days, while tallying charity ball proceeds with other circle members, Betty uncovered puzzling financial discrepancies. Money supposedly funding scholarships and hospital equipment upgrades didn't reconcile logically. When Betty asked innocent questions while recounting totals, sharp looks silenced her swiftly. That night, Betty dreamed of a towering oak with branches spanning the town, women's screams echoing from its shadowy depths. She stood trapped in intricate roots, slowly swallowing her whole as thorned vines circled closer. Somewhere in the darkness, a tolling bell counted down the minutes remaining before she lost herself completely to the ravenous garden. Betty woke shrieking into muted 3 a.m. shadows. She knew time and luck enabling her risky investigation were steadily running out. But when she grasped how near the answers lurked, surrendering her quest felt equally impossible now. Chapter 9. Cracks in the Foundation. That night, Betty barely slept, besieged by swirling dark visions. She started violently when Charles slid into bed beside her. The comforting scent of his skin still so familiar, yet now tainted by menacing unknowns. As Charles drifted asleep, Betty studied his face intently. The man she loved remained, but obscured like the moon behind storm clouds. What other sinister secrets festered inside him out of her sight? Slipping from beneath shared blankets, Betty moved silently to the bedroom window. She lifted the sill carefully, letting night air rush over her clammy skin, raising goosebumps. Somewhere an owl hooted, its cry echoing her own mournful lament. Betty thought of Charles burying secrets in cemetery dirt, hiding nefarious activities behind respectable facades. She imagined a vast web of similar clandestine associations across Rosewood Falls composed of powerful, charming men. Like those in the garden circle. A gasp caught in her throat. Pieces clicked regarding odd remarks she'd overheard from the circle women about some members' husbands being more privy to confidential affairs. Were Charles and other husbands somehow connected, or even orchestrating things secretly? Betty trembled, grasping at the window's edge. She felt like fractured ceramic hastily glued together, just one revelation away from collapsing completely. But the cracks now webbing across the veneer of her life also allowed slivers of light in at last. Turning towards the bed's shifting shadows, resolve hardened Betty's spine. Charles still slumbered peacefully, as if his undisturbed conscience entitled him to rest despite tangled deceits. In that moment, watching her husband's chest gently rise and fall with untroubled sleep, a startling truth crystallized in Betty's mind. Charles may have betrayed and endangered them, but she refused to ignore that reality or be complicit any longer. For both their sakes, the disguises and denial must end. Betty inhaled deeply, welcoming the refreshing night breeze on her face. She would confront Charles in the piercing light of morning. They would have a reckoning at last before ghosts from their garden of lies destroyed them both from the inside out. Until then, Betty kept vigil, fortifying herself for the battle ahead.
Thank you for joining this episode of Suburban Secrets. Betty's journey into the heart of Rosewood Falls grows more perilous with each secret unearthed. What lies beneath the town's serene surface? Tune in next Twisted Tuesday for more revelations in the intricate web of Suburban Secrets.